It's Tuesday, November 19th, 2024, and at 6 p.m. tonight, the Henry County Board of Supervisors and Planning and Zoning are going to have a meeting right here inside this building, the Emergency Management Building here in Mount Pleasant. And they're going to be discussing the alternative energy overlay, solar, wind, and all that goes with it. And this episode is brought to you by Griner Auto Body of Washington, Iowa, using state-of-the-art techniques and decades of experience to get your car back on the road after an accident. Car Doctor of Washington, Iowa, no matter who Frankensteined it, they can fix and clean and customize it. McDonald Boneyard of Keota, Iowa, for all of your farm equipment and auto recycling needs. Hinshaw Trailer Cells of Richland, Iowa. You need a trailer, they've got your trailer, and they fix what they sell and don't in their full-time repair shop. Girling Repair of Winfield, Iowa. If your mower is dead, call Fred, your Husqvarna, Aaron's, and Gravely dealer. Fred also fixes and sells snow blowers. B&B Propane and the family of Jet Stops present Southeast Iowa Today. I'm John Bain, author of Christie's Journey, The Beat Goes On, and your host. I'm going to take you inside to this meeting. I have no idea how long it's going to be, but we're going to try and get it all.
So I call the meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is to approve the agenda.
I will make a motion to approve the agenda.
Any discussion about it? Or all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved. And we are to review and approve the minutes of the last meeting from October? No. Yes, October 15th.
I'll fix that.
That's supposed to be the 19th.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the 29th. I will make that correction.
This wasn't an error. This one. Okay. Change the date on that then.
Yeah, might change the heading or forgot to change the body.
So we're looking for a motion to, I will make a
Yes.
motion with the dates corrected as Joe stipulated to accept the minutes from our last meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries, passes. Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is to get the joint work session started with the Board of Supervisors to discuss the alternative energy ordinance that has been proposed. Does anybody wanna, you've sent it back with some proposed changes.
Has everybody got the emails and things that have been coming weekly? What I've been doing is collecting them, putting them into a folder and then forwarding them to Joe for, nearly weekly, maybe not every week, dissemination out to everybody.
I've copied most of them, but not all of them.
There's a bunch of them.
So the major concern we have is, I would say, is setbacks. Is that what we need to work on more than anything? Or is there other things there's a few to do?
The setbacks, definitely setbacks. Other things have come to the forefront about, maybe even having, the alternative energy methods. But of course, we've had solar for quite a while, different solar areas. How do I put it? That whether or not we even should have that as an option for people. Or not, you know, whether to have it or not. I don't know that whether we could exclude that or not, a wind energy option. I think you're right, it's the setbacks, that are the most concerned.
I think the abandonment or destruction of is a big dollar item too that we were concerned about.
Decommissioning, is that what you're talking about?
Decommissioning
Yes.
or
Yeah.
just abandoning, because we talked about, you know, whether a bond is sufficient or not.
Abandoning
Hmm?
the,
Abandoning.
the,
Well, you know,
structure.
they could put it out and then see, you mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, or when it's run its course, they can just walk away.
And
when
clean up of it.
when I first read the $5 million bond, I thought, well, that's a lot of money. I didn't realize the amount of money that is invested in these structures. I don't think $5 million is enough. And I think it should be an escrow account as opposed to a bond. That's one of my points. I have a couple questions that I would like to settle in my mind. This packet that we just received tonight says current ordinance. Has that ordinance been passed?
Yes, it's for the force for 2 odd years.
Okay. So the 6/2/11/2 through 6/2/11/6 has actually been in place,
It's in place.
okay?
Where did you get that?
Tonight,
Oh,
this
Tonight.
first, this one.
okay, I'm sorry.
Then
I
why
thought-
does it have?
The ones that were emailed this
It's in there
afternoon.
with that, why is their name on it?
I do not know.
Do you know why, like, CWECS's name is on the ordinance?
Well, that's either,
The commercial wind.
That's just an acronym.
I know, but why is their name on the ordinance is my question.
Whose name?
These as operator.
Oh, CWES isn't a company name, that's just a general acronym for commercial wind power.
Okay.
And the social, so the solar power.
Okay.
They would have to, the information that, that would be there, then they would have, if they're applying, they would have to have the owner on it, on the application.
I thought we were attributing it to them.
No.
I believe the ordinance was done, I know I was on the board when we did it, and it's been quite a while,
Well, the original ordinance was done in 2011,
that I was here.
and then it was amended in 22. That's when we moved it from being a conditional use permit to being approved by the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah.
That was in 22. And that's when we added the solar portion of the ordinance.
Yep, I remember that. I mean, originally when we did it 2011, there was no, windmills around them, I think Joe brought up the point, and I did, that maybe we need to look into doing something, cause down the road, something's gonna happen, and we're at that point now, so.
So, like, where did you get your criteria from initially then, do you know?
I-
The criteria that's in the ordinance, where did you get that from originally?
The distance,
Yeah, all of the stuff.
I believe we had gotten, not the vast quantities we've gotten this time, but I think we had gotten other, counties' input from what has been going around in the state at that time. And that's where we came up with that distance. And we had no, I mean, there was nobody coming forward with a project or anything at that time. So it was pretty arbitrary what we came up with.
So this was developed from other counties that were in place at that time?
Yeah, we took,
It was collective,
yeah,
Yeah.
we took kind of the averages, what the other counties were doing.
the best of the best, and try to get rid of the ones that didn't make any sense. It was fair.
And back then, the structures would not have been as large.
I cannot recall what the sizes were. I mean, I think my probably opinion is I probably looked at New London's and assumed that was the general size.
That's what, at the time we wrote it as 2 times the height of the tower to account for, larger towers would account for a larger setback. That's why we wrote it
Yes.
as a,
Double of whatever the size it was, whatever the project is gonna be,
as opposed to just a straight
number.
setback, right?
I guess I'm gonna ask, what are the pros and the cons of having a alternate energy overlay district? You know, what are the pros, what are the cons, how does it benefit the county, how does it, you know, on both sides of that, and
As opposed to just
as opposed to not just having
a regular.
just a
plain
regular ordinance, you know?
I have no idea.
You know, I think that is kind of some common ground that really needs to be unpacked and
I have no idea.
and fully understood there, so.
We kind of talked about this, is there, alternative, the overlay, there is no pros or cons to it. It's just, it's a method to approve the project. You've got generally 3 ways to do it. Conditional use permit through the Board of Adjustment, which is where we started. An overlay, which allows the underlying zones to continue to exist, and all the rules that are already in place will continue to be in place for houses and garages and whatever else are gonna be built. And then you have a set of rules built into the overlay zone, and once you decide where the wind project is gonna go, you overlay those rules on top of the underlying zoning. If you were to just have a straight rezoning, not only would you have to account for the wind project within that zone, you'd have to account for the houses and garages and businesses also within that area. So it would make it pretty convoluted. It's much easier to do an overlay and just put it on top of the existing zoning and allow that existing zoning to continue as it has in the past. So there's really no pros or cons to it, it's just a method.
So it's not necessarily zoning regulations for anything else except a wind.
Right, it's just, that overlay is just discussing the wind, or if it were solar, discuss solar, but it doesn't talk about, you know, garages being built in the area, or houses being built, or, you know, any other kind of.
It just determines height, distance from property lines.
Yeah,
And
it just, it sets up the rules for a wind project, and then it says when you decide the area where you're gonna put the wind project, those are the rules that are gonna be in place once you decide where you want it to be. It's kind of like, airports are typically overlay zones. You'll have all the rules for an airport in in an ordinance, and then once you decide where an airport's gonna go, you put those rules in place, because you can't just say, we're gonna put an airport over here, it may not, work topographically or whatever reason. So you let those rules exist, and you let that zone float around until you find a place where it makes sense, and that's basically what this overlay zone does.
Does it circumvent any approval of rezoning within that overlay? I mean,
It doesn't. It's with the site plan in place, it's actually probably a little more restrictive than a normal rezoning. For the normal rezoning, once you rezone an area to commercial, a normal commercial rezoning, everything in that ordinance that is allowed in commercial is allowed to happen in that zone, subject to the setbacks and whatever other rules are in the zone. But you can't pick and choose which commercial projects go in there. If they're on the list, they're all approved.
If they can abide with the regulations.
If they can abide with the area regulations and the setbacks and whatever else. Whereas this is based on, there's a site plan with the application, that here's where we're gonna go, this is how far things are away. And so you know up front where everything's gonna end up. Whereas you don't necessarily know that when you rezone for, a straight rezoning to commercial.
To go to the point of decommissioning, did not this under, .05, the decommissioning, the discontinuation of decommissioning, under D, does that not satisfy what you think decommissioning should be, as far as the
Where you
cost?
at, Mark?
I'm going back to the one that was on the, overlay, alternative overlay district, and it was on October 8th. Was the one I'm reading from, and the changes that were possibly looked at. It talks about, the, cost to decommission, would be by a professional licensed engineer in the state of Iowa that's approved by the county. And when you talk about the county, I think we're talking about the board of supervisors. And then it goes on to say that it needs to be looked at every 3 years, and the bond shall be in the favor of at least $5 million to the county. So,
That's a minimum figure. The
That's a
engineer
minimum
says-
figure.
If the engineer says it needs to be 30 million, then it's 30 million.
right, but it could be 20 million per, and then another 5 million on top of it, right?
Well, that's a minimum.
That's a minimum.
It can't go below that, but it can go as high as it needs to satisfy what the engineer's got.
There's no minimum actually on it, so.
I was with them, but I guess
I think it starts
On the proposed,
down here. It starts and then it goes, the back of that page has the $5 million.
yeah.
D. Yes.
That is, to my point where I don't think $5 million is enough anymore with the size of these things.
But it's not stating that, Jim, that 5 million is, it has to be reviewed every 3 years by a licensed engineer and reevaluated. And then the bond would have to be bought current at that time, if it needs to be more.
And the minimum is 5
Yeah, the
million.
minimum is 5 million.
So we're setting the minimum, or asking that the minimum be set at 5 million, renewable every 3 years by an engineer, licensed engineer, to see whether that is an adequate amount of money.
do we know if it's an adequate amount to start with? I mean, have we have an engineer here?
We don't have any project to
You know, the project.
base it on.
So
But there's gotta be industry standard.
the current ordinance, and then we have the ordinance from the supervisor's work session. Are they the same except for what's in red?
No, they are not the same. They are different.
So this is completely different?
Not completely, but there are portions of it that are different. most of the bonding is different. And there are a few scattered, words that have been changed for clarity, but most of it is in the bonding.
So, but everything in the work session paper, if it's not in red, it is the new.
It's what the supervisors have currently agreed on, if it's in black. If it's in red, they have not agreed on that area
Okay.
that's in red.
But it's not in place of the current ordinance, the current overlay that we have in this paperwork.
It's a similar but different document.
But it's not in place.
Okay,
It's just what they're working on.
okay.
It's a rough draft.
Okay.
For,
And you're wanting to know whether we think it's okay to do those changes.
I think it's a good idea to get everybody's heads
Yeah.
together.
Yeah,
that's
and
why we're
collectively
here.
to do this. Versus, one board do this and this, and then.
So the items in red are the ones that you have questions on, or that you didn't come to an agreement on?
Correct.
We have not come to an agreement.
Okay.
Would it, and hear me, kind of,
No.
would it work going down through this, so everybody's reading off the same document?
Yeah, we
And
don't
reading
want,
the
we don't
same
wanna
thing,
look at the
because
one that's not in
Absolutely,
place.
too many
Yeah.
documents.
I'm having some difficulty, I've got jagged lights,
No,
and I'm not reading. Gosh, this hasn't happened in months, but it might go all the way across and I'll be able to see again. So I'm sorry, I don't know whether Greg would want to take over, cause I'm
So
cannot see
You're just
clearly
wanting
yet.
us to go down
Well,
through each one, kind of, Yes or no?
the red letter one.
yeah, I got it right here.
If we go down through that
I'm
and
sorry, but,
that way everybody's on the same page, reading the same information versus.
I will listen and not read. I'm gonna close my eyes, see whether that'll pass.
Well, if we look at, 01, let's take a look at that, and see if there's any. That's just general information, Chris.
Yeah, those are requirements,
Yeah.
so they're application requirements. Those are generally the same as the original documents.
Now, I had a question on 5. When I read it, it was 200% radius of the tower height. Would mean if it's 750 feet, it's,
1,400 feet separation distance.
Radius,
yeah,
Yeah.
not
fell,
diameter. Yeah.
it's got a whole nother half. And that's what we looked at in 14 years ago, was what would look, safety wise.
So to apply for to put one of these up, where's the enforcement? If they apply and they meet it to begin with, that's it, they can go in and put it up?
Well, it has to be rezoned, supervisor has to approve the rezoning. This is the information that goes into the application that goes to the supervisor. Well, first it goes to you, the planning and zoning commission recommendation, then it would go to the board of supervisors for approval.
It's the same process for doing a housing development. We go through it.
And what would it be rezoned to, if it's already commercial?
Well, in this case, most of the area that this likely go to would be zoned A1, but the area out for it'd be the alternative energy overlay district, that's what the zone would be that overlay zone.
Those letters, in other words,
Right.
or
We,
zone
we,
E.
yeah, we
Zone E
may
or
come up with a
something.
shorter name for it.
Zone E, okay, yeah.
And if we flip that sheet over, we've got the requirements for commercial solar energy systems. And that's 6211.3, which is basically the same, it's a different thing for the solar, but that's what's laid out section-wise, right, Jim?
Yeah, the first section is common to both wind and solar. then the second section is specifically solar, then the next section after that is specifically wind.
Okay. And does anybody have any issues with the solar? That we've just gone through?
I think everybody's been kind of focusing on the wind energy and hasn't really thought through
I'm
this.
just going through. Then we go to, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, page 5, it'd be in quarter of the way down, 6.2.11.4, requirements for commercial wind energy conversion systems within the alternative energy overlay district. Okay. Page 5. Does anybody have any issues with the color or finish?
Is black necessarily a safe color?
It's an approved color, I mean, that language for color is in, I think, every wind ordinance I've ever seen.
I mean, there might be times where black would not be an easy thing to
Well, it
see.
says here, like, blades may be black in order to facilitate de-icing.
I've never seen a black one, but that same color is in every ordinance I think I've ever seen.
Okay.
Lighting's just general, what they have required, is that correct?
Right.
Law wise, or?
You know, it speaks of the Federal Aviation Administration permits and I'm not sure what they call it, where it goes off of the proximity, where an aircraft gets into proximity, they come on, and then when they leave that airspace, they go off. I think that would, in my mind, be somewhat beneficial, because talking with other people, looking out to see the sea of red lights out there is problematic for some people. At least if there wasn't an aircraft in the area, they'd go down and you wouldn't, it'd be that many less lights. I don't know if that equipment is installed on every one of them now anymore, or I don't know, in my mind, that's a good idea.
If a helicopter comes flying overhead in University Hospitals, leaving Fort Madison, because they cruise over my house
Yeah.
on a
Yeah,
daily basis.
but something in the aircraft and the radar and sensing equipment in these things, when something gets in that airspace, it comes on, so how it all operates, that's beyond me.
Yes, I mean, safety wise, sounds like a good idea, if that's what they.
It's automatic, I forget the acronym. ADLS. I'm sorry, what was that?
ADLS.
ADLS, thank you, I couldn't remember that.
We had somebody who flies though, who told us he's had occasions where they don't shut down. And then the meetings we had.
Did you say that again, Kim? I'm sorry.
We had a situation where a pilot told us that he even calls in, I think, to tell him he's going to be in an area, and he's actually had wind turbines not be turned off when he was
Well,
flying.
this will
I
just
think
be the lights.
this is just lights to let
Oh,
them know.
okay, all right, well, they weren't
The red
turning,
light.
yeah, he said they actually did turn off the entire
So
wind
the
turbine.
rotor's not
The rotors
spinning.
are still going, yeah.
Under E, the feeder lines, is there another place that was said, you say buried 5 feet, but I'm more concerned about how far back from the right of way, because if something needs to be done in the right of way for the county, they might need to be more than, I think there needs to be a setback that's workable for our secondary roads department.
And his
Jake
recommendation
was
was
50
50 feet.
feet. His recommendation is 50 feet back
50
from the
feet
right
off
of
the
way.
right of way.
Off the
Correct.
right of way, yeah.
Correct.
I think that needs to be added.
Yes.
On the feeder line, 5 feet deep or greater and 50 feet.
50 feet onto private property from the right of way roadways.
Back from the property line 50 feet.
Yeah.
And brings us to K, setbacks. And that would be on page 6. We're highlighting. Got a question, Joe?
Yeah.
Is this a good time to bring up these?
Yeah.
What do these mean?
Oh. Map 1 is what the setbacks would be under the current ordinance, assuming a 650-foot tower.
That's this blue one.
The blue one, everything in blue would be where you could not.
Current.
Yeah, that would be what the current ordinance would show, and everything in the light blue would be an area where you could not put a tower based on the current ordinance.
And this is based on a 650-foot.
650-foot tower, is based on
So-
2 times the height.
And the yellow is available.
So that, the yellow and the blue, the blue is RWE.
The light blue?
The dark blue.
The dark blue?
So the dark blue and the yellow would be available areas, the light blue, kind of pastel blue would not be available under the current ordinance.
This blue.
Yes, that would,
That's not,
that's not available.
okay.
And those setbacks are from houses, not from every structure, that's just from houses.
So 1,300 feet from houses.
And that's based on the 200 radius that we did previously, correct? These are?
They're based on a 1,300 foot radius.
Okay.
And actually, it would be, overall, it would be less than this, because there are more setbacks in there. This was just a setback map based on structures, because it's hard to know where, where all the power lines are, because you'd have setback from power lines, you have setbacks from. So this would actually be even decreased from that, but that's a lot harder to model, because I don't have all that information built into the system. So this is just basically showing what the structures would prohibit. You'd still have, like I said, setbacks from roads and power lines and so on that would increase that further.
And you said from all structures.
Well, that's from dwellings. That blue happens, okay. That should have been changed. That one's just from dwellings.
This is just houses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next one is 2,500 feet.
It's the pink one.
The pink one, excuse me, is 2,500 feet from just dwellings. And then the circles, the red circles represent 2 miles from Wayland, Old, and Winfield. The purple circles represent 1 mile from the rest of the communities. So again, if it's in yellow or dark blue, it's a buildable area.
Okay.
Third is 2,500 feet from all structures. What's, again, yellow and blue is a buildable area. Everything brown is not.
Did somebody not get,
Let me ask you this. Like, say, this little blue dot here, could somebody put one in there, even though doesn't look like there's a lot of property around it?
Well, if you were to have 2,500 feet as the ordinance, yeah, they could put one there.
You could put one there?
Yeah.
Is that 2,500 or 32?
That's
25.
Okay, I'm sorry.
From all structures.
From all structures, correct. The pinks are from dwellings, the brown are from all structures. The pink, this is 3,280 feet a kilometer that's from dwellings. And then the last one is from 3,280 feet from all structures.
So 3,200 wipes out the whole county. Okay.
And I'll bring it up at this point, I guess, if that's all right, man. From residents, I don't think it's fair to anybody going strictly from the residences. I think the idea of a property line setback makes more sense than a residence. Because if you have a parcel of property and you have a home that's off, you know, not in the dead center, but if it's off to one side of it or whatever, you might wanna build a house there at some point, closer, you know, on that other side, and that setback wouldn't be there for you then. I think, in my mind, property line is more, I guess, protects the property owners better
Future plans.
for future plans.
Correct.
You know, I don't care if I wanna build a house, or if I wanna build a pond and have a gazebo down there, that ought to be in protected area if I'm not a participating person.
And the current ordinance and the proposed ordinance also has a property line setback, which is 1.1 times the height of the tower. It was actually
Well, that's on their
two.
property, but I'm talking, it ought to go to my property, not my house. You know, if this sheet of paper is my parcel, and my house is here, and there wants to be a tower over here, well, maybe, you know, maybe I wanna do something and develop this acreage here. So, from the tower to the property line, protects my area from that. Yeah, I mean, am I making sense?
Yeah,
Does it-
to me, yes, and for what it's worth, I agree with you, it should be the property line, not the dwelling or structure.
To add to that, I have told you at our meetings, that I did visit the tank, the old towers that burnt.
I was gonna ask you about that.
And, the lady who was involved with it, her comment was, the minimum should be 2,000 feet from a property line, it should be the setback, is what she said. And her fields were affected. And, the degree was screwed farther than that even, but she said that should be the minimum in her eyes, after experience what they had done. So, that's coming from someone who's directly been affected by that.
But they still, on the property where they're putting it, they still have to state how far away from any existing buildings that's on that property.
They're talking about an existing and someone else's property line that has to be that far away.
Yeah, the joining,
But if I'm a member, or I decide I wanna sign up, how far away from my buildings does it have to be?
She didn't make any comment about that.
I mean, if I'm a participating,
Yeah, but she's talking about a property line.
Yes.
It doesn't affect the neighbor, because she has neighbors that have been very much affected.
right. And that was my question was, then, we don't want to do away with the distance, confusing, the distance from the tower to the a building on that property, piece of property that they are building on,
Of their own of their own building,
yeah,
on the
No.
property owner?
yeah, and the property owner, I mean,
I don't think
that's what you were concerned with, was.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a participating, and how far away from my house does it have to be?
I would assume you would probably want it twice the distance.
Yeah, twice.
Well, I understand that, but we probably ought to have that in here.
Again,
If we're talking about, that's two different things we're
It's two
talking
different
about.
things.
Yes.
See,
Yes.
and you're saying right now that, and here it says a 2,500-foot buffer from the dwellings. And now you're saying let's also add how many thousands
I'm
of
not-
feet from the property line?
I'm not saying
From the
add,
next
but I'm just
property.
saying what I was told
Right.
that we need to be considering.
Yeah, well, and considering to adding that from that neighboring property line also. Because that's a whole different,
That goes to
Area.
the point of what Chad was talking about too.
we're talking 2,000 this way, 2,000 this way, correct?
From the edge of your property.
From the property.
Yeah,
Edge of
say,
your property.
this is his property, it's 2,000.
That's my understanding.
Mhm.
That's the way I would interpret it.
Exactly.
that's what she was saying.
Yes.
And then an additional thing of a 2,500-foot buffer from the dwelling
That you know.
on any of the properties.
Well, I think that
It
the
can
buffer,
be.
the buffer to me would be, if a participating landowner wants to put this on their land, as far as I'm concerned, they can put it right next to their house if they wanted to. I mean, what
There are
I know you want to
insurance
protect those people that have signed up, but I don't know that you should restrict them from putting it on their own property if they want to put it 500 foot from their hog house or their barn or whatever, that,
You know, we have restrictions on how far back,
That would be-
setback would be for a confinement unit, but it's not on, but it can still be close to your own home too.
Yes.
So that's what we're
Oh,
trying
that's
to
what-
consider, that type of
Right.
I
comparison.
mean, there's gotta be a safety issue there
sure,
too.
yeah.
I understand that.
And if that's the 2 times the height or whatever. But I think staying on the property lines is probably the best idea.
Joe, this might be a stupid question, but, on the average, what are the blocks? Are they like 80-acre, blocks up in the northern part of the county where, people own, 80-acre here, 80-acre there?
Well, I mean, they're generally 40-acre tracts, and it doesn't have to be 40, a section's,
Let me ask you this, what's the
40 acres.
distance between, the blocks from the square of, gravel road, one gravel road to the next?
It's a mile.
648.
It's a mile?
It's a mile, yeah.
And the county is set up in mile
Yeah.
sections.
Yeah, each section is a mile square, and then
There's
No
exceptions,
matter what,
there's
it would be
exceptions
over
to
that.
that, but generally a
It'd be
mile.
over the road, that 2,000, if you put it right square in the middle.
like, if you did 2,000 from property line, and your neighbor had 40 acres, that would not be enough property to build on, because it would exceed that entire property. So it would
If you,
preclude them.
if you stuck at the 2,000.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, it's 1.1 times the height of the tower from the property lines. That's the closest you can get to somebody else's property line, is 1.1 times the height of the tower, regardless of where their house is.
I reached out to Schuyler County, the emergency management director in Schuyler County, Missouri, down by Queen City and down along that neck of the woods there. And they've had 3 catastrophic failures in about a 7.5 month period right now. And what I was calling to get is, I asked him what the debris field would be on those collapses. And he said he didn't have that data right now. I said, any report that you can give me on the the causation, the after actions report, if you will, whatever you wanna call it, on the investigation of that collapse. Could you share that with me? And he says, yeah, he said, that data is hard to get a hold of. That data has to be out there somewhere. I mean, but it's a company doing that. They don't wanna give out information about their company.
How
Were
much
they
damage
fire
they
or-
did, yeah.
Cause I know one new one, and it lasted, that tornado came through, and I was
Yeah,
kinda shocked at that one.
The first one I asked him, I said, do you have anything on what you can share with me? He said the first one, broke because of bad bolts. I suppose metal fatigue, he said the minute vibration, the metal fatigue in the bolt, it toppled, boom. The second one, mum's the word so far. So after not being able to get anything from him, I called the Missouri, the head department of the, and asked for that, and I haven't got anything back from them yet either.
Show me shit.
But yeah, show me state, show me that.
Um,
But I did ask him, I said, how big of field rough estimate did the damage occur in, you know? And he says, oh, essentially around the turbine. Well, so what's around the turbine, you know? I asked him how tall they were, and he says, I think they're around 400 feet, but I don't know for sure. So, you know,
How big an area were those on the fire?
The one that got hit by
Yeah,
lightning,
the mechanics bill.
over 1,000 feet on that one. I have
what was the height you
the-
tell
Or
us?
no, it was 1,000 acres.
Yeah,
Is
1,000
what
acres.
that
He
one,
said the debris varied
The
a
debris.
mile and a half or more.
on that one.
Is
yeah.
affected by the,
By the fiberglass.
by the fiberglass, correct, okay.
Yeah.
I read that, but I can't remember.
The damage to the soil was $1 million.
And if he thinks he's going to take off 6 inches of 1,000 acres for $1 million,
Yeah,
I don't think I wanna hire him as my accountant. But
I have an aside question to ask. You've talked with different counties. Have you talked with either Pocahontas or Calhoun County up in northwest Iowa? They've had, the wind machines for, what, at least 10 years, if not more. Might be a good idea to check with them.
I talked to, Marshall County, I mean, he has no problem with it.
And where's,
Marshall County.
yeah, I mean, just for some future, you know. And, I have a, somewhere in here, I have a list that was sent to me by a resident up there. If I can find it. Sorry, I should have kept it separate. With pros and cons of what the people think up there.
when I was at ISAC, I visited with as many different county supervisors as I could, between the sessions and everything like that, and I made notes of where they were from and if they had anything noteworthy to say. I know Adair County has the highest population of the density of wind turbines. They have like 500 and some odd machines. One supervisor said enough is enough. Where the other county supervisor said, yeah, they're no problem to him. So, you know.
In that county, what was their layback, their setback? That's the one along the interstate, correct?
I think so.
Yeah, just west.
I think it's south of the, south side there.
Yeah, they got a lot out there.
They said the pros were, of course, clean energy with no hazardous byproducts. It adds and this is what I don't understand, it adds substantial tax base to local communities. You'd understand that more than I would.
Working on that.
Provide some income to landowners, would that be, rental for their property? And it's a continuous,
Leasing.
and it's a continuous rental, right, okay. The cons, it's not economically viable without government subsidies. And this one up there is owned by foreign investors. Destroys natural landscape day and night with the red lights. Blades and the blade shadows confuse the local wildlife. Underground concrete and re-rod base will be very difficult to ever remove. Interferes with aerial application of, and didn't you say, someone said that it did
He
not?
was at one of our meetings, you may not have been
No,
there.
yeah. And, some inconveniences for general farming practices, basically, so.
I rode up to Deep River, Montezuma area, early spring, just for the sake of seeing other turbines, you know. I drove randomly, just drove around the area, stopped at different people's houses and just asked, hey, what can you tell me about the wind energy? You know, what can you tell me about that whole process? And the landowners had the common denominator, they liked the money that they were receiving. The farmhand for that landowner said he wishes that he had them elsewhere, stuck somewhere elsewhere. Because they were hard to work around, they interfered with the farming practice. He said, a couple years ago, the company brought machinery in there to change out, I think they called it a repowering. They changed out the propellers on it, or the blades on it and whatnot. And he said, you would think they would pick better weather to do that in. And he said, they run the crane as far as it could go, then they just kept putting caterpillar on caterpillar on caterpillar until they just literally drug everything up there. And he said, I've been fighting ruts around there for a long time now, you know. The landowner says, I was compensated for the damaged, crop that they run over. And yeah, it was, I don't doubt that a bit. I pulled into one, probably an 80s model farmhouse, ranch style farmhouse, that, pretty nice property. I mean, it had a kid's slide in the back and nice acreage around it, but about a quarter mile of my best estimate was a wind turbine behind it. And knocked on the door and there was cobwebs over the door. So, I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see, nobody had come and gone out of those doors, the garage doors, the driveway was snow packed and powdered, smooth, like nobody's come and gone out of here, you know, type thing. And I went up, talked to the farmer next door to him, and I said, anybody living there? No, they moved. I said, how come? He saw what was behind them. And then he didn't wanna say a whole lot much more about that.
I'm wondering about, there is a constant hum that people have to live with. It's not loud,
Yeah.
but it's a constant hum.
And I got an example to share with everybody here too. I mean, if you wanna hear it, I'll be glad to share. been thinking about this a lot, you know, obviously. I downloaded a decimal meter on my iPhone. I'm not saying it's the most accurate, I'm not saying it's the best, but it's what was downloadable, and I could sit there and record the decibels. In my living room at 430, I live 0.23 miles west of Highway 218 on 200th Street. So it's right on the edge of the flats. The gravel road in front of me connects up with the highway. My furnace makes 42 up to 42 when it was running, 34 just sitting there still. 4:30 in the morning, just the ambient noise in my house, 34. Furnace kicks on and it goes 42, 43, you know. A semi went by and hit the rumble strips along the side.
Right next to your home, you mean?
0.23 miles
Okay, the
west.
two.
Yeah, my house is quarter mile, essentially. Went up to 53, 54. You can hear that rumble strip, you know, type thing. Greg and I went over to, Centerville, and we did the tour over there, and we stood right under it and measured it, and, 68 was by the same meter, the same phone, you know, as try the apples to apples. It diminished a little bit when you got further away, of course, but sound travels by lay of the land too. I mean, if there's a hill or a gully or things like that, sound travels. This was pretty flat, Greg, if I remember right, it was pretty flat ground. There wasn't a whole lot of topography there. There was some rolling, a small rolling hill, but nothing huge. But, you talk about 68, 72 down to 34 in the middle of the night, and there's quite a little bit of difference there. And that's what the people up there at Deep River and Montezuma were telling me. They said, you really don't notice it in the daytime. You know, when there's traffic, when there's, you know, things going, you really recall it, you really get a hold of it in the dead of the night when you are trying to sleep. That whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. So, yeah. She didn't know that I was collecting good information, bad information, anything. She just had said that. And she said, looking out the window, that red light, that sea of red lights is crazy. And I asked her about, I said, what brings you back to this area? She said, my family and I, life's things, we're moving back into this area. We wanted to buy an acreage. They had to look further and further away from the Montezuma area to get away from a turbine, because they don't wanna live next to a turbine. And I said, how come? Noise, the lights, that thing. So property values are a concern, in my mind. Property value, if somebody is out of the realm for looking at my piece of property that I wanna sell, is that a thing? I got off on a tangent here a little bit, but,
That's why we're here, is to
well,
discuss. Is to
that's-
not get off on
yeah.
tangents, but to discuss. Yeah.
So we wanna look back at, circle back to,
Sorry.
setbacks.
So, I mean, do you want individual our input? Do you want, I mean, are we supposed to make a motion and what?
Speak up. What are you looking?
Well, I don't know what you guys are looking for from us. If you want each of us individual,
For myself, I'd like to see you as a board come to a consensus what
Okay.
you wanna give to us.
okay,
because
that's what I'm asking.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
Mine as well.
Cause we've empowered you to do this.
Correct.
And, Joe gave us these layouts, and, I was kind of thinking more of a, 1700, 1800. Cause it looks like the 2500 eliminates pretty much everything in the county. 32 especially.
So the buffers on the towns,
That's what, yeah, so.
the circles. So you're a mile from the unincorporated, the three unincorporated, and 2 miles from Wayland, Winfield, and Olds?
That was per their request.
Yeah,
Okay.
And can I break down the 3280, the kilometer? That was from a portion of a wind generator manual type thing. And it says in the time of a thunderstorm, lightning storm, the recommendation that was written on this form that we got in some of the literature said a kilometer, the recommendation was to remove themselves a kilometer away from that tower. We've asked RWE for a current Vestas turbine manual for what you would wanna hear. And to see if there was apples to apple, I mean, this other company said that for some reason, we wanted to see what Vestas was. And I have not seen that manual yet, so. I've seen a portion of it, but nothing that said anything about that.
So 3280 is a kilometer.
But the others are feet? Or are they all
No, they're all-
kilometers? Are they all kilometers?
They're all
3,280 feet is the equivalent of a kilometer.
with some money.
Oh,
5280.
And the rest of it are
are feet, yeah.
but none of them take into account from property lines.
Correct.
They go from residences or structures or dwellings,
Even the max do.
yeah.
There's just a reasonable way to model setbacks from
Yeah,
property
I
lines.
yeah. But reasonable, if that's your property, I mean, that, in my mind, we would have to consider that at least, so.
For me, I like the 3,280 feet from the property line, not from the dwelling.
I agree with you there.
What I like on that one.
What'd you say? I couldn't hear you.
3,280, that's the 1 kilometer from a property
From the
line,
property
not
line.
from a dwelling. And there's, I don't know how to make it better, but there's, for example, ambient noise level, they have to employ all practical means. To me, that means they don't have to do squat. I mean, what, they can say they do, but how are we gonna know that?
Their definition of practical is different than.
Exactly.
Well, and enforcement would be very, very difficult too. We've talked about this ourselves a little bit, and Joe, we've talked about it. If there's a complaint made right now of a noise, how does it get investigated at a later time? Because,
That's what I'm getting at.
It may not
Yes.
exist. at a
because
later time.
a wind turbine has variable pitch, the blades
Yes.
will pitch, and depending on what the setting of that blade pitch is at that particular time, there's so many variables you would have to go back and be able to replicate to get an apples to apples measurement. I mean, wind speeds, there are just so many things,
I agree.
you know.
And another one, you know, that, well, I'm kinda sticking to that point, but I'm trying to make another example. Under the signal interference, they're supposed to minimize the interference. Okay, what is defined minimize? And who is it gonna affect? Is it gonna be a private individual that lives there? Is it gonna be somebody out there with a auto steer field equipment? Will it be a pilot? Will it be first responders, their equipment, their radios? And how are we going to enforce it? If that question could be answered, I'd feel a lot more comfortable making this, trying to come up with some viable ordinances for both sides.
And Joe right now does not have the equipment to do that and the expertise to do that or anything. I mean, that's just something that the county is not in the position of seeing. You guys,
I mean, I guess I haven't seen it in this last one, I haven't read this all over, the one I had didn't have your latest word, in it. But there was reference to a third party. Yeah, the third party says, okay, there's violation, very good, how do we enforce it? I think if it would be a escrow type instead of a bond, they don't fix it within 48 hours, 7 days, you know, we pick a day to put in there, the county can start pulling money out of that escrow. Cause if it doesn't hit their pocketbook, they're not gonna do it. And that's why I mentioned the escrow, and the escrow, it doesn't have to be one big one. There can be one for noise, there can be one for road use or road damage, there can be one for signal loss. That's where I think you would get more effective enforcement of the ordinances. So,
you folks had looked at, I feel like I'm doing all the talking here. Good one.
I got a question. Joe, just, if we look at the 3280 setback, does that pretty much wipe out any project in the county?
Yeah.
Okay. And if it was 2500, would there still be any ability for any project to take place in the county?
I think it would be pretty limited. I don't think it would be I don't think it would be very viable. I mean, you have to ask each company, but it's spread out as those areas are. I think it would probably be pretty difficult.
What's the threshold of being able to, you know, there's a line somewhere, where would that be possibly?
I think once you get over 2,000 feet, you're
Ruling out property?
you're getting pretty close to ruling out.
And that's what county? Said 2,000 feet?
What was that lady, was that?
Mechanicsville,
Mechanics, no
That's-
work? What would that be? Cedar?
yes.
Cedar County.
Most ordinances have setbacks from dwellings and then setbacks from property lines. They're two, you know, and what we have currently is fairly standard. You know, there have been some counties that have been passing much more stringent setbacks. But up until 5 years ago, 1,000 to 1,500 foot setback was pretty standard. There was very little that exceeded 1,500 feet. And those have been in place for, 20 to 30 years.
And that's from the property line.
No, the property lines are generally 1.1 times the height of the tower. That's a pretty standard
Oh,
language
sorry.
for property line setback. So you have a 650 foot tower, you're talking 15 feet from the property line. And then it would have to push back farther if there was a house less than 2 times the height.
we don't have a map based on property lines, just your gut feel on a map of the same distance, property line versus structure.
Because property line, you'd have to know who your participating properties, who your non-participating properties, and that, until you have a project, that's almost impossible.
But
to
just
know.
gut feel, do you think it would be more space or less space available?
I think probably less space. Because you're gonna have a lot more non-participating parcels than you're gonna have participating parcels. If you step back from each property line of a non-participating, that's gonna take a pretty good chunk of the county away.
How can we come up with, other than an escrow, to be a financial burden that you're gonna actually cost the company money? How can we enforce it? Is there another way through the Board of Supervisors, county attorney, sheriff's office? How can we enforce it other than an escrow?
Well, I mean, enforcement eventually has to go to the county attorney's office. And any kind of fine would be a court order that would be imposed by a judge. You couldn't just say, I deem you to be in violation, we're gonna take money away from you. That's not gonna fly anywhere. There would have to be a judgment from the court saying that you're in violation.
And there has to be, that's what the Watchman's group thing that you had read once upon a time, it didn't have a lot of the due process, procedure-wise involved in that. That was part of what made it unviable, undoable, because it didn't have some of that language put in place of it.
So even if there was an escrow account, you'd have to have a judge court order the money taken out.
They'd have to be found guilty of violating the ordinance. And I think if you were to require an escrow from this business for any future violation, I don't think you could confine that to just this business. You'd have to put that in place it'd have to be equal for everybody. You couldn't just pick on one business and leave the rest of them off the hook.
Well, this is specifically aimed at wind turbines.
No, he's saying by company though, I think. Right?
Yeah, by company, but we're specifically dealing with wind
You
turbines.
can't enforce against one use differently than you can enforce against another use. You can't treat a wind farm, a wind farm violation differently than you treat a gas station violation. They get treated, there's different rules in place, but how you treat them in the law is the same. You have to treat them, equally in the law.
You can require one to have put up a $5 million bond,
Because that's for decommissioning, right.
but not the other.
And and there's some things that we probably should add decommissioning to. It hasn't been an issue, but, it's something that we look at. But,
And I do not know whether escrow is the most.
Escrow.
Escrow is the way to get money from them if there's damage or a bond. I mean,
The right vehicle for.
yeah, which,
Which one is the right vehicle? That is a good question.
I don't know.
I think, damages would be a bond. That's a typical way that you
Rather than
account.
But typically, you don't pay the full face value of the
Right,
bond.
a bond, you
Whereas
pay
in
something.
escrow, if you required them to put $5 million in escrow,
It's
they're gonna
$5
put
million.
$5 million in
Right.
there. Otherwise, they're gonna buy
Cash.
the bond's basically an insurance policy that says for $1 million, we'll give you $5 million one.
The treasurer told me she can't hold a $5 million bond. Well, I'm not sure that would work either. Yeah, she said she had no mechanism to maintain an escrow like that.
Distance,
Okay.
just trying to get this resolved and all the other stuff done. Stay on focus.
And thank you for doing this.
What?
Thank you for doing this. It goes in and
Well, I
out.
don't wanna be here all night.
Well,
This is the main topic.
My lightning is going in and out. It's better, but it's still going in and out.
Well, I agree with Jim, I like the 3280 from property lines.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still with that.
$32,800 means no project.
Are you looking for a motion, or are we?
This is a work session, so there's,
Yeah.
we're just kind of come to consensus,
Okay.
is all we're doing.
I know I was part of the original structuring this, and I'm still kind of in favor of what we had before, but, around 2,000 would rather be that way if it would still be feasible in the county, but by the maps, I don't know if it'd even be feasible, it's even that distance.
Are you also talking property line?
I don't know what we do with the 2,000. I think it was the setback was, I'm talking setback.
Okay.
From the property line.
No,
No,
from the structure,
From the structure.
From the structure or dwelling?
the structure, setback. Radius, which would mean 4,000. 2,000 here, 2,000 that way.
So you're drawing a circle around each turbine of 2,000,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah, for 4,000 total.
And that's distance to the property line or to a structure?
I haven't even addressed the property line, I'm just
Okay, you're
throwing
talking
that out
about
right now.
2,000 to.
Nibbling at it so we
to a
get something
building.
done.
To a building. To a building.
What?
2,000 either way to a building,
Yeah, 2,000, there's my town. 2,000 here, 2,000 there, 2,000.
to any building.
And what would that do to the county, Joe? Is there still
Going for-
feasible?
Well, you can take your 2,500 and you said all structures, so take your 2,500 map.
No, I'm talking a tower,
Well,
tower initially.
these are all the house, let's get down
This
to.
is
Right,
1,300?
this is the 1,300. This is 2,500 feet. Yeah, 2,500 feet from all the structures and from, because whether you made it from the structure
Yeah.
or from the tower, it's the
It'd give a
same.
little bit more with the 500 off the 2,500.
Yeah, you back these little circles off
Yeah.
by
Fifth.
by a fifth, by
Yeah,
20%.
fifth,
Yeah, so you kind of shrink each one of those, it's gonna, some of these you can't tell how much they overlap because it's completely painted,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and that's the issue, is the vast majority of it all overlaps.
If I had my program here, I'd go run it off real quick, but I don't. So I can't. Come on, it would open it, from dwellings at 2,000 feet, it would open that map up more, not as much as, of course, the 2 times, but it would open it up more than what that is.
If you're gonna do the property line, what's your suggestions if it was a property line distance? Double the height of the tower?
I don't think that's enough. I wouldn't vote for it, but that's.
2.5 or 3 times the tower?
Uh, No, I wanna stay 2,000 feet, half a mile from the property line. That's what I want to do.
I like property lines. I like a bigger buffer, but I would see some buffer if I could get property lines basically at 2,000 feet.
That protects the neighboring property owners more, I think. So you were saying 2,000 radius from the tower,
Mm-hmm.
and we're saying.
And if there was a property in there, like on the corner of, a parcel, it would be still within, outside of the,
I think a good way to, at 2,000 feet, a property owner that wanted a tower would have to have more than 160 acres per tower. They would have to own more than 160 acres to put up one tower at 2,000 feet.
You know, we gotta think about what the population density of the area is. You know, how many people are living per square mile in Henry County. You know, what's the population density in Texas, you know, versus Iowa? Obviously, we got a state that's 4 times bigger, that's got a few more, so that tells me it's spread out a little bit further.
So when the company is buying or leasing from participating, is the amount of land they're leasing in response to the setback? Or do they just lease this section even though it has to be, even though the setback is bigger? You know that?
I think it would depend on what the rules end up being. If it has to be 2,000 feet to a non-participating property, they would probably have to bring, you know, enough of that property into participation to meet that setback.
So the farmer would get reimbursed for the entire setback allocation, right?
That would be between the company and the landowner. I have no idea how they would handle that.
and all I remember is they bring in, they do a right of way, you know, build whatever road they need to get back where they're gonna build that tower, and then when they're done, they tear it out.
They tear the road out,
Hmm?
they tear the road out that they.
They take everything out on a lot of sites. If you go to a lot of places, there's no road to it. It's just a tower off the field. And if they have to do some maintenance, they bring it in and build it again.
Another comment, once again, not to get off the feet, but, you've all read what Tom Vilsack's code is,
Mm-hmm.
no? How was it?
Using frame farmland.
Yeah, using
Go off
non,
your CSR2 basis.
using non-farmland, or,
Lower
Tillable.
quality farmland.
yeah, low quality. That I don't know, whether we need to make some sort of comment.
Those upper 6 townships are pretty good pretty good CSR ratings.
That could be an ordinance.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, a LISA system. And like we kind of talked about, you know, if we're gonna look at it from, you know, a CSR protection standpoint, we probably want to put that in the ordinance generally. You know, there's no difference between protecting an acre of farm ground from a house or a wind tower. It's the same amount going, you know, being removed from production. So you'd probably wanna, you know, treat that removal of farm ground the same way regardless. And that could be done, I mean, there are counties that use the LISA system and build criteria for, you know, yes, you can build here, no, you can't because of these you know, different factors, the drainage and the CSR and so on.
But that is in the comprehensive plan to protect.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But how is that, I mean, is there, it just states to protect farm ground.
If I remember right, I believe so.
Right.
But we really don't have anything specific in the ordinance that, you know,
It's just a statement.
that's in, it's a statement. That would probably come, you know, probably more come in, at least right now, as for like rezoning. If we were to rezoning something, we would look at that farm ground. But as far as how things are zoned right now, that CSR rating doesn't come into what can be built there based on the current zone.
Do you wanna make a motion about the distance?
Well, I've got other points before I make a motion, and can we even make a motion since it's a work?
I don't think so.
There can't be any action taken.
You guys are just taking notes of what we're saying?
I was wondering if we need to establish that if there's an issue that the venue has to be a Henry County court. Since these companies are not local, you know, if they ask for
Well,
changes.
prosecution would be in a Henry County court. Now, like any defendant, they can ask for change of venue, and that would be up to the judge. We couldn't circumvent that if we wanted to.
I like the idea of the farmland restriction. And you know, the distance wise is, I think that might be a good idea to put in it.
If I can find
And you
64
like
and
the
a half.
CSR rating,
Yeah.
corn suitability rating?
Yeah.
64.5 more.
I think that was what the city CSR was the breaking point. You know, it had to be anything above 64 and a half is not buildable.
Well, that pretty much takes the project out. Or it takes Wayne Township out. So I don't think there's any ground under 70. Probably barely under 80. And it'd leave Canaan out. But
I'm trying to.
where does the 64.5 come from?
I think some other counties have that.
There's a prime number, it generally falls between 60 and 65 is
Somewhere there.
the break
And that's
between.
also in what article that Vilsack was quoted in.
Okay.
Also.
Above one is prime farm ground and below is not, and it's right in that.
He was talking about, yes, he was talking about prime farmland.
Yeah, right, okay.
I like that
I
idea
do too.
because it's not, it's more a protection mode than it is arbitrarily trying to guess what the, you know, what is the best distance or whatever.
What's the qualifying for that? You guys know? For
The
that word?
CSR two?
Yeah.
It's based on the soil types and the yield potential.
Not rolling hills or anything like that?
No, it's,
If you look on any property sheet, it'll tell you what your CSR two rating is. The average for the farm, for that parcel.
If I can bring you some examples of Lisa factors, cause there's more than just CSR in there, there's several different factors, and you basically, I'll get points, and if you exceed a certain number of points, then the project is a no, if you don't exceed that, then it's a yes, that's kinda how the Lisa system works.
I'd like to see that.
Are we all in agreement, the 50-foot setback from the right away? Would be necessary, do we want it in there?
Yeah.
But we're not really voting on anything today.
I know,
No,
but I
but-
just,
Make sure that they know that we, okay.
Let's go back to the structure. Everybody got their opinions put out, but they wanna have the board here. That's what you're looking for, right?
Yes.
It's not in this one.
So far, I have you three gentlemen written down.
Okay.
Nothing else on the distance?
Oh, I'm sorry, no.
Any more input on the distance setbacks? No?
You've got 2,000 feet?
I just said 2,000. You're open to whatever you want.
No, that's.
It could be 2.5 and more.
And my opinion was the 3280, the property line.
You said the same thing, correct? 3280.
Yeah.
Okay. We're good with that? Moving on?
I think so.
Yes.
Alright. We did property lines, or I think we talked about it a little bit. That's about overhang or adjoining property. Any change in that?
Yeah.
B.
Oh, yeah.
Public right of way.
That's something that the engineer, you know, that would be a whole other nightmare to look at. They would wanna take a survey, a road survey prior to any construction, assessing and looking at the conditions of the roadway and documenting it for comparison's sake.
Before and after.
Before and after, that way, after a construction project would be done, go back and look, you know, what the immediate visibles are. Because some of the other counties are saying that there's not always an immediate showing of things that you need to be concerned about. You know, things would crop up later. But that's kind of an engineer thing.
Communication electric lines, D. And, noise is the next topic.
Oh, I don't like the 25 feet away from the structure. Somebody brought it up to me that if I'm at my house, sitting on my porch, I'm closer than 25 feet away from the house. So why should we measure the noise 25 feet if we're gonna be sitting a lot closer? Cause at the first meeting we had back in January, they said the noise gets louder after it bounces off. So that's why they wanted it moved out to 25 feet away from the building.
So you want greater distance?
No, less.
So you're talking like maybe 10 feet away from your house?
Yeah. I can't think that it gets that much louder, but they claimed it did.
But Yeah, whatever,
You can,
10 feet's fine.
you can measure it sitting on my porch.
Get something to drink.
I might have some.
Okay,
And what levels?
Yeah.
One time I thought the industry was saying something about 45, weren't they, Greg? Weren't they, Mark?
I
Wasn't-
believe so.
Yeah, 60, in place of that 60, that number was 45, right?
That's what we put in the
That's
work,
what-
in the
that's-
previous
that's
work
what's in
session,
here,
45.
right?
Yes,
That's what's here.
Just leave it as 45?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
that wasn't the original.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
And I think our next section is, maybe anything else on that one is safety.
I think Ed was talking about structure safety and things like that, right?
Yeah, it goes through the wiring
Yeah.
and the wind turbines. Shall not be climbable 15 feet. You know on that one?
And as we go along with safety, do you wanna talk about personal safety at this point, or just safety on structure?
What are you talking about, personal safety?
Just, you know, I'm not an audiologist, I don't know how all the inner ear works or any of that works, but, you know, there's some talk that infrasound, that the noise from the creation of this is detrimental to hearing. I don't know, you know, I'm just saying, you know, 40 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, we didn't know talcum powder was bad for hygiene purposes either. But it is now, right? 40 years ago, we didn't know what Roundup herbicide would do to people, but we do now. So is it premature to consider any of that? In with the distances and the noises and everything like that? You know, that grinding noise, the Netherlands, the Norway, Sweden, things like that, they're moving these things back up to 2 and 3 kilometers away from population centers. Why? I know it's another country, I know that, you know, but why are they doing that?
and do we have any numbers on, as you said, the audiology, what damages?
From the mailings, I think it's all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys, it's way over here, way over here, and
Yeah.
different opinions of this or
So
that,
I
so.
mean, you know, is there enough information,
Must be.
solid information out there that we could do something and make a statement in this with, about it?
I guess, what is solid information right now? Yeah, I wish that definition was known.
But the 45 is what they've talked about, I mean, traditionally, through the, companies that produce this stuff. Okay with 45?
Mhm.
Yeah, I was looking for info on the low frequency and I can't find it. I think there should be put something in there for that. And I don't know, we don't have the ability to measure it.
Yeah, that is an
Yeah.
engineering feat that none of us know how to do.
Safety wise, anything change on the safety? I think the biggest thing we got next is the discontinuation and decommissioning is what you guys want to address, correct? I think the 6 month is reasonable.
So the removal of the facilities, it's another 6 months, basically.
So 6 months of no generation, idle time.
Yeah,
And then,
I think we saw some before, it was like 2 weeks of not working, and I'm like, that wasn't realistic, and then
Right.
I'd shut it down.
Then you give them another 6 months to remove it.
Yeah.
180 days.
So for the time of no,
It could
no
be a
longer
year.
producing 1 year.
Yeah.
It has to be gone.
You have to be
Yeah.
gone.
Okay, to do that, I'm gonna throw something in. To do that, we gotta have production records from that company then,
Mhm.
right? Because they can free spin and not
Juice.
create any juice,
Oh, yeah, cause it says without energy production.
yeah. So
Then
But
put
does
that
that-
in about needing,
how do you have access then into their production record? Because I know they keep,
I'm sure they do in our houses.
yeah, yeah. You know, and a technician told me that they have, you know, just about any given time that they know when at what pitch that blade is set, the wind speed, the generation capacity, that, you know, there's a whole litany of different things that is all recorded into that. But not having that, it could be spinning all day long and, you know, we,
You're not producing. Well, and also, it, 6 months to determine a discontinued use without energy production. But give them another 6 months or 180 days, and it says
Are they,
to remove it, what is to keep them from, maybe 7 or 8 months after it's discontinued, in that time they're supposed to be removing it, what's to keep them from starting it up again?
and my reading, my understanding of it is that not all turbines can be online generating at the same time anyway, because of the capacity of the transmission lines and everything like that is limited. So there are,
at this time probably, right?
so there's idle times where they can't spin it to generate anything because the flow capacity of the transmission line is already there. So, doesn't that throw an unknown into whether it's operable or not too?
Well, I'm just wondering what a requirement could be from a company to notify the county, when something's, not in production. Cause you're right, you wouldn't know, it could sit there for 3 months and they could start back up and run it for a little bit. And what does running mean? Spin it around a couple times and then turn it back off because they were testing it.
Yeah, cause they run it without any production too,
Yeah.
and we don't know.
you know, I wouldn't think they would, I mean, it's mechanical, you wouldn't think they would wanna spin it a lot and not generate anything, because,
There's out the parts.
I mean, there's wear and tear on things, but you don't know that, you know, we don't know when that production is unless you have that access to the records. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess that's the way I'm looking at that.
I think the point of this is that we wanna know as soon as possible that they've stopped generating, so we can start that clock moving toward it moving. The point of this is not, well, you didn't generate for 6 months in 1 day, so we're gonna quick shut you down before you can start up again. That's not what we're trying to do. So we just wanna get to it as quickly as possible. The chances of us knowing on the 6 months period is probably not very likely. But as time goes on, it's gonna become, it's just like any other non-conforming, you know that, Barb, you have to kind of watch things, and eventually you figure out that it's not functioning like it should, and you just keep track of it, and eventually you know that there's, you know, the workers don't show up for work anymore, there's nobody at the place, and,
Oh, there's a problem.
Right.
So if it's been not operational for 6 months, and it's determined that, hey, you now need to decommission this, you have 6 months. If they turn it back on after the 6 month, they've been notified, does that,
It'd probably make it null and void.
so, I mean,
They're unoperated.
yeah, I mean, that doesn't seem right. Once the 6 months, and once they've been told, hey, it's been 6 months, you need to start decommissioning, it should be offline, and they need to take it down.
again, that's not what we're trying to do.
But that's what they're gonna do.
We want to start taking it down once we know that farm is no longer viable, that they're not going to use it, and they're done with it.
No, the complexes, we don't know.
Well, eventually you're gonna know that they're done with it. The chance of knowing that at one particular date is pretty small. And they can come back in and say, well, we had to shut down, we have this issue, we had to shut down for whatever because we couldn't get a part. No judge is gonna say, okay, you're done, you have to stop. That's just not gonna happen that way. You know, there's
That
no.
might be the case, sometimes they might be able to get something for 6 months.
They may, and they should, they should come and tell us if they're having issues, but they may not. And we order them to shut down, we're gonna have to get an injunction from the court to shut them down. I mean, us just telling them you're gonna shut this down is not gonna shut them, unless they're voluntarily, if they want to voluntarily shut down, they're gonna shut down. If they don't want to, it's gonna go in front of the judge. And if you follow any kind of non-conforming or discontinuation court cases, you'll hear, oh, I was sick. This is for something, somebody's running a lock shop out of their house. I got sick, I was in the hospital, and I was shut down. The judge is gonna say, okay, that was beyond your fault, you're fine, you continue to operate. So there's a lot of factors that are gonna come into that. And the point is, we're not trying to narrow them down to this window that if they run across it, we're gonna take their business away from them. We just wanna make sure that when it stops functioning forever, we can start getting rid of it as soon as possible.
So is this kind of the standard, Joe, 6 months and another 6 months, or,
Yeah, I mean, those are I think standard is probably a little longer than that, but I don't think those are out of the ballpark. They're on the shorter end of the scale, but I don't think they're egregious.
okay with leaving that out? Major change? Alright, how about B?
I don't like it, I think they would take the entire facility and ground out, but I mean, that's not what it agrees from.
They say how deep it has to be?
Their foundation?
Yeah.
I don't know how deep it
Like
goes.
20 feet or more, something like that?
It's probably deeper than that.
I'm on their plans, yeah.
700 yards of concrete.
I knew it was just something unbelievable.
And right now, 5 feet, right?
That's what it says here.
That's
but
what
we haven't
that's what
said
I'm saying,
anything.
yeah, that's what.
Me, we're worried about the landowner's responsibility, not our, that's not the responsibility of the county in any ways. What, when you're talking about that, you're talking about the landowner's responsibility and not how it affects the county. And I think what we need to do is how it affects the county.
We're talking about the company's responsibility.
I know, but what we're trying to say what the landowner should have taken care of if he's gonna do this too.
We had this discussion before, the discussion was that 5 feet below grade protects the county in general, the traveling public, once it's down 5 feet below ground, nobody cares. If the landowner wants it gone completely, he can write that into his contract, and that affects his ground and it affects him, anything beyond that.
So this is just the minimum for.
That's a minimum, if the property owner wants to write it into his contract and take it all out, that's up to the property
Cause you
owner.
were thinking.
Or
of
10
things
feet.
to do.
Or what, yeah, whatever, they could, it has to be at least 5 feet, but the property owner can contract for whatever they want.
Would that require the underground power lines need to be removed too?
It does not require that, that would be up to the property owner if he wanted to remove it or not.
Or would that be considered an accessory facility? The power lines?
Not in our ordinance, it wasn't.
So C is what you're talking about. Plan shall describe any agreement between the landowner. Yeah. 5 feet, okay?
I don't think it's enough. We can move on to the next one.
Well, what would you suggest?
I would say
8 feet, 10
everything,
feet?
everything they put in needs to come back out. What I would do. That would include the
In that
cement
case,
and
then
the
what
water,
would they put back in that hole, clay?
whatever they took out of it,
Fine Canaan Township soil.
yeah. But when they dug the
It's
hole,
supposed to be 12 feet deep.
I think so.
Has there been any discussion made, I don't know if it's ever been addressed, when the hole is excavated, what that spoil dirt, whose dirt is that, what is done with that?
It'd be in a contract. It's property owner's dirt, so it'd be whatever they want it, what their contract to do with it.
Alright, got anything on C we changed? How about D?
Here it says a performance bond or equivalent financial instrument. Would that be the escrow?
Probably not.
And would the bond be more favorable than, yeah, be more favorable than escrow cash? And it would be safer.
Got a question, in your little research, what was the amount? More than 5 million? Did you find out?
Say your question, your question.
On the recouping, on the 5 million,
Decommissioning stuff.
what did you find out from other counties, what do they have?
I'm not sure what Des Moines County, I wanted to say they were 5 million, weren't they?
Yeah, they were quite a bit too.
I think they did theirs when I did, I think it was going around the state at the time. Do we know of any other counties that have a
Higher.
30 million or?
I've not heard of anything that I know.
And then is it in here, I mean, do you revisit that amount? Every so
year,
often, every 3 years? Okay,
Yeah, that's an E, the
okay,
following.
okay.
Do you know the cost of decommissioning just one of them?
That's up to the engineer, would have to tell us that. He'd have to, that's what he would.
I've heard some figures,
Is that
but
secret information or?
I've heard a figure, but you can't hardly get a house stored for, you know, 5 grand, you know.
And this 5 million is for the entire,
It'd be through the entire
well, I know,
network.
them, it wouldn't be just for one.
That's what I was wondering if it's
per
a million
tower.
dollars
It is per tower.
Per tower.
per tower.
Well, that's not really
Yeah,
said
that's-
anything in here,
If it's per tower, we don't have that in here.
yeah.
So that's.
So you need to
It
put
needs
that,
I thought
Needs to
that
be
was,
in there.
that, yeah.
Per tower.
that's what I couldn't find that it was in there, so,
Yeah, that needs to be.
You know, then,
so,
That's
yeah.
what my point was.
Yeah.
you know, salvage values and everything would have to be,
That's what I was asking him, and what just to tear down one would be,
Yeah,
and you could have that done. That might be something you guys need to research and find out. Go to E.
and that's
3 years is
3 years, they
reasonable.
need to research it again. Okay,
F. That's unreasonable. H.
So on H, if they have not said they're going to renew it, is that the 6 month for the decommissioning start at that point in time?
so is the bond taken out for just a 3-year period? Or in other words, you know, 90 days prior to that anniversary of the bond filing or renewal, then the operator or owner shall take steps to begin decommissioning of that at that time. Well, that,
If it's only a 3-year bond and it runs out in that 90-day period,
then what?
I know some counties were talking, and I want to say maybe Des Moines County was one of them, that the bonds kind of leapfrogged. So there was
So what?
one in place at all given times, so there would never be a lapse in there, that it would kind of leapfrog and
So
one
you've
of the
always got
bonds
coverage.
would cover that,
Yep.
and there'd be, you know, the effective dates would,
Yeah, but it says that the operator, then if it's not been renewed at 90 days prior to the anniversary of the bond filing, the operator shall take the steps to begin decommissioning of it at that time, which means they've got 6 months to, and after that 90 days is gone, if they didn't have a new bond,
The bond's
There's-
ours then.
would they forfeit that?
You
What if
call
it-
the bond.
if it became.
You wouldn't have it written so the bond ends on that date.
Oh.
The bond would continue without reevaluation past
Okay,
that date.
that's what I meant, I was wondering
Yeah.
if it just
Because it would just be at the 5
expired,
million. It
if
wouldn't-
it
If it
expired.
needed to be raised because of inflation or whatever, but it would still be at the original amount.
It would
Until
be-
it got revisited
It would be whatever the last.
every 3rd year.
So it would not expire, in
No,
other words,
it would not
okay,
expire.
okay. I've not had that much
Anything else on that one?
to do with bonds personally, so.
That was a high credit.
That was H.
Okay, I, any questions on I, that we just talked about? J has to deal with contamination.
Go back to H for a minute. If financial security has not been renewed at 90 days prior to the anniversary of the previous bond filing or renewal. So it's talking about it being renewed
on 3 years, it needs to be
Reviewed.
reviewed and adjusted if need be. If they don't come in and start that process of review, that within that 90 days, then we're going to assume that they don't plan on continuing, because they're not renewing them, they're
But
not,
if they don't renew a bond, is it no longer in force?
no, it's still in force.
Okay,
It's not renewing it, it's increasing it if it needs to be increased.
okay,
They may reevaluate, and say things are more expensive, now we have to increase the bond.
okay,
But we're not renewing it, we're adjusting it for inflation,
okay.
is basically what's happening with it.
All right. Jay again.
With creeks and runoffs, water drainages, things of that nature. Um, We're not talking thousands of gallons of oil or anything like that, we're talking, I know the ones I visited, they said there was 80 to 100 gallon of oil in one, but they weren't as big of ones either, so. So what would that do to a creek?
And that's what this J covers. That's what item J covers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could easily have that in an agricultural vehicle.
Yeah.
Use that much real fast too, so. You can.
Okay.
How are you going to verify that?
So you're gonna look at everybody's lease?
You know that one, Joe?
It's the easement, yeah, I mean, we're requiring it, so they,
They have to file it with you.
we're not looking at their lease, we're not looking at the money agreement, we're looking at their, what's contained in the
They
easement.
file that with you,
Yeah, the easements are filed.
with the county.
Right.
So it's there somewhere in.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, Alan? Avoidance and mitigation of damage to public infrastructures, road use agreements.
I mentioned earlier, the engineer would be a person on that'd be heavily involved.
Yeah, here we have that 50-foot setback we were talking about.
Yeah, but it doesn't say from the right of way, unless I missed it.
That's what Jake was wanting, you know, from the right of way of gravel road that needs to be set onto private property,
50 feet.
50 feet at a minimum, just to avoid, you know, ditching and, you know,
Well, and
tubing.
That's what this says basically without saying property line,
Well, it should say from
It
right
just
away.
should say from right
or
away.
from right of way instead of parallel to county roads.
Well, all setbacks are measured from right of way. That's the definition in the zoning ordinance itself. That's where we measure all setbacks from.
Any issue with the 50 feet setback from long wall? Is that pretty much
Basically,
standard?
That's what we said earlier in another,
Is that standard what?
Not really, I haven't really seen that.
That was a request from the county engineer.
And, you know,
Let's go to,
I guess I'm just gonna say it, just because it's not somewhere else doesn't necessarily mean that we couldn't do something here, I wouldn't think, right?
Not necessarily,
Drainage system?
What's immediate?
Is that kinda like covering like a culvert, get crushed or something like that?
Yeah, that's basically what it's talking about, caving in a ditch or, you know, something that's gonna disrupt the water flow.
But what's immediate?
You know, Greg and I went to, I mean, this was a different company, this was a different scenario. But we went, we pulled up to the wind energy turbine, and first thing I saw, I don't know about Greg, but I think he probably saw the same thing, was a terrace full of water. And Julie, I don't think Julie's here, but I took out my cell phone and started taking some pictures, and she says, that's not a very flattering picture, is it? I said, no, that's not. I said, how long's it been that way? And she didn't know, but the landowner said 2 years. That's not immediate in my mind,
Well, this is public.
That's not
drainage.
public.
Yeah,
but
that would be up to the agreement between the landowner
Yeah.
and them. We're talking about county ditches and.
what's immediate?
County damage.
The thing, we do have the ability to go ahead and repair it ourselves. The county would, and then bill them.
I'm okay with that. Anybody, other opinion, that's fine. Required financial security, that was the big stickler, right?
And not on the roads, that was, I don't think we've had much discussion on the financial security on the roads at this point.
So this would be another bond,
Yes, this would be specifically for repairing any damage to the roads.
but it would be, I mean, it's just another one, not,
Right.
it had nothing to do with the $5 million.
Correct. It's specifically for road construction.
Okay.
Any questions on that? All right, additions?
They have any way of determining that amount? Who's gonna determine that?
I suppose the engineer.
Right, it would be the engineer.
Recommended by the county engineer. Okay.
Would it be beneficial to put in, and any outside, contractor, any outside engineer, cause I know our engineer doesn't handle everything.
But he has the ability to get the cost estimates from outside firms. I mean, the bottom line is it's gonna rest with his decision and what needs to be done to repair it or to restore it to its previous, state.
But here it says financial security in a manner approved by the county attorney. And it doesn't say anywhere who determines what that amount is.
It's 150% of whatever cost the engineer comes up with.
Yeah, well, it doesn't say that he's, whoever, it doesn't say who's coming up with the cost. Or proposed cost. Isn't that what you had a question with? It just says, the security in a manner approved by the Henry County Attorney's Office shall be submitted covering 150% and then adjusted, yearly, the cost of all required improvements, but it doesn't say who submits the cost.
It'll be the county engineer.
Well, you know,
He's
but it's-
responsible for the roads.
he can, it says the county engineer can waive that requirement, but it doesn't say that he determines what that's gonna
So
be.
you just want that put in?
I'm
Specific.
just wondering, you know, or some, I mean,
It says it can be waived by the Board of Adjustment by recommendation of the Henry County
okay,
Engineer.
yeah, I'm sorry. But it doesn't say anything of who determines the cost and therefore what 150% is.
You want the county attorney, or
And
the county engineer, or a qualified engineer?
Can we say both, or?
Cause like you said.
Yeah, either or,
Everything.
or qualified engineer.
I mean, I don't think the county attorney can say what it is and therefore make.
No, the engineer's gonna come up with the cost, the engineer's
Yeah,
gonna,
but it doesn't say that, I'm sorry.
I don't know who else,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, the roads are the engineer's responsibility.
I think this is the last page, right? Last page?
Yeah, well,
Okay,
yeah.
6.2.11.5, ongoing maintenance and waste removal. Any issues with 1A?
Earlier, you said that the road that they used for access to get in would be removed. So how does any other person get to it, like
There'll be
emergency
access
response?
roads. There'll be access road.
From the county road into where it is? Okay. But it was said earlier that they would,
Sometimes they take it all out.
yeah, they take it all out.
Yeah, 'cause they got everything underneath there.
Yeah.
Lines are buried, and they take out the road. If they need to go to put new blades in, they build a new road.
So, oh, a site shall be maintained to a level acceptable for
Right.
emergency
And
response.
I think that goes down
officials.
to the owner's contract, because if they wanna farm that land around it, they take that road
You're right,
that they put in out after it's built.
and actually, the emergency response could get across the field if they had to, yeah, okay. I know, that's picky.
Anybody have anything to contribute on the waste?
Should it say something that it needs to be removed by the company? I mean, we've seen some examples where not all of the waste was removed by a company after, we've received information like that, whether that, I don't know that the landowner is responsible for removing that waste. A company where I think the landowner should remove it, I don't know.
My only issue is all waste generated during construction, like 12 months. I can't imagine it takes 12 months to clear a site.
Rid of rapidly,
Mhm.
keep from wind blowing.
If they have to remove that lawn, the right of way road.
Is this something that's okay to assume that the company is going to be doing that? But
I don't think it better
some
assume.
information, that we did
I was
receive
thinking
from
something
people.
shorter than 12 months.
Well,
You know,
some information that I saw, that I received from people said that, when one, a tower had been destroyed or, tornado came through and destroyed it, the company did not remove it. It was still left there and the landowner had to remove it. So I don't know whether it should be,
your Mechanicsville area up there.
whether we should say to be removed by the company owner.
Is that our problem? I mean,
Oh,
truthfully,
for
it's
the
the
county,
landowner's
for the
problem.
county, yeah, it's the landowner's problem.
we're doing the
It's part of their,
county.
it's part of their contract with the
Yeah.
company.
Okay, okay.
Unless it blows onto a county right away. Yeah, I think that 12 months is, that's a year. Why is it that generated from the operation is 60 days and generated from construction is
A year.
12 months, a year? I think them could both be, actually, to me, I think those,
You got a
them
number
could
you're
both
thinking
be
of?
30 days.
30 days?
30 days is what I'm thinking of. The rest of it.
From the end of construction then? Like when they're finished within 30 days?
Yes, when they're done constructing it. I mean, if they're done, the construction crew's leaving. And actually, if they don't take it with them.
Is there, where did the 12 months come from? Is it because of
I
like
think,
seasonal, like,
I
you
think
know,
this is
winter
talking
hits,
about
you can't get back in there?
the entire construction period.
That must be the
Is-
industry standard, I don't know where that is.
Well, it says ongoing maintenance and waste removal, so it's not just when they're constructing it and when they're finished
The
with
60 days
construction.
is ongoing stuff, and the 12 months is that construction window. You know, they can pile up stuff during construction
Yeah.
at the end of 12 months.
So they're putting up
Construction.
20 of them, they can store stuff on some site for 12 months.
Right, I mean, if you wanna say that it's all gotta be cleaned up like, 30 or 60 days from completion of construction, you can say it that way, I guess it might not to the same thing, it's a little different language.
Or waste oil stored on site until a collection amount or something,
And that would be the waste generated by operation.
that'd be kind of an operational type thing.
60 days.
So that last sentence, all hazardous waste shall be removed from the site immediately and disposed of in a manner consistent with local, state, and federal requirements. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. The last one, liability. And I guess what you were getting, it's landowner's responsibility.
I don't think that's suites, I think it's just suits, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Take the E out of there. Losses, suites,
Oh, yeah,
I know, picky, I know.
no, that's good content. Spell check won't catch those.
That's the end of it. Anything else to add or review? Are you guys satisfied with what we did?
I'm gonna ask, would you guys be interested in hearing from the incoming supervisor that will be inheriting some of this issues? If he has any comments or anything?
Absolutely.
I would. If he's willing to comment, I'd certainly listen.
He's willing. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks Chad for that, and thanks to the board for doing all the hard work that you've done. I know this is really challenging and has been a lot of hard work, but I think, several things that came up this evening, with some of those things in mind, questions y'all have that maybe you're not quite sure of. And just a couple of things here. There's no reason that this board can't reach out to public health, for example, and ask some of the questions, Jim, like you were asking about noise and those types of things. I have an example here from Clinton County, and
Okay.
y'all can take a look at that and share it.
Thank you.
The public health group there did the same thing to help you, and there's no reason that we can't reach out to the county engineer, for example, and get some input from him, or even Walt here at the emergency management group, and get some input to understand what happens in a catastrophic event, whether it's a fire or a destruction of a windmill with it coming down. A whole field, to Jim's point, or Greg's point, could burn, and so what's our opportunity and what's our cost to be able to make sure we understand how that all impacts us. So I think if you folks could reach out to those boards, they'd probably be open to providing you some information to help understand and support some of the questions that you have. And that really builds on the unity that y'all have as boards as well through the community, and that you're all working together. And I think that really supports some of the decisions that you have to make here. Another thing, one of the things I'm really concerned about, and I don't see this anywhere here, and it goes back to something we talked about very early, and Greg and Jim both said this a long time ago. I think we need to understand the difference between a private type of a turbine versus commercial. And the reason for that really goes back to how that energy is transmitted. And if you talk to the folks at Access Energy, they'll tell you that 100 kilovolts, or kilowatts rather, 100 kilowatts is what we consider to be a private turbine versus what's gonna be on a commercial basis. And that really goes back to some conversations we've all had about who can build a wind turbine and who can't. And it's really important.
What we were going through was just for commercial.
But I understand what you're saying there, Barb, and I agree with that, but I think that we all need to understand the definition so that when somebody does come in, there's a definition to understand where private is versus commercial from a size and a capacity standpoint. Because you can only put so much energy back onto a transmission line, like we've all talked about a little bit ago. And once you get to that capacity, then it goes to a third-party discussion, to ITC or NEMO or MISO or somebody like that. So it's really important for us as we write ordinances to be able to understand that. And I think all the things you've talked about with the escrow and the bonding, I think we better understand that as well. And another thing that really concerns me a little bit, and I think the board and every board throughout the county, we always need to keep in mind what the legal implications are, but it's not the board that has to worry about that, because that's why we have a county attorney. His sole responsibility is to represent the county, its employees, and its commissions. And so if there's a legal concern, that's his job. So it shouldn't really be in the forefront of the discussions that we're having. It could be in the background, but never in the forefront. Those are some of the things I've observed tonight. I do have my information that I've really built on from the discussions that we've had over the course of the last 6 or 8 months. I'd be more than happy to share those paper documents with you tonight too. I know it's more paper, more to read, but if you're interested, I'd be more than happy to share that with you. You guys have any questions of me?
Thank you. Welcome aboard in a few months.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
And thank you for your comments. A question I forgot to ask earlier. Is there a copy of the ordinances that are actually in place, that exist in this county that we can look at to know what
Yes,
exactly
it's
is
online.
at the time?
It's on the
So we
webpage.
have to go online and look it up. Okay.
The zoning ordinance.
Well, all the ordinances are all on the county webpage.
Okay, but yeah, there's,
Sounds like something exciting to me.
yeah. I did not know that part of this was actually passed. I thought it was, I didn't know we were dealing with that. I thought it was all what was suggested by the supervisors. I didn't know there was ordinances actually passed. And I was making my decisions on that assumption, and obviously it was wrong. Okay,
And we will be making some changes.
I hope so. That sounds good
Still
to me.
running the meeting.
You,
I am.
I don't have my lightning thing going across anymore,
all
but
right.
if you, that's right, we do have an agenda, don't we?
Yeah, just.
Any other business?
I have one piece of business, lost the term. Urban rural area you guys are working on, apparently the commission has to sign off on its compatibility with the comprehensive plan. So we need to come back and address that. regional planning has asked us to do that. They need, it's just basically a motion that it conforms with the comprehensive plan. So we just need to set a short meeting to accomplish that.
Can I just get, ask at that time, do they have a rep, is they be voting on what was discussed tonight to bring to us then, or how is that gonna go about?
No.
What is your plan, what's the plan?
I think that meeting we're just gonna have, we're just gonna get that out of the way so they can move on with their project.
So are we just to take what we heard tonight as a planning area to make our decision? Or, I've always thought we need a recommendation. from them.
You will eventually need a
That's what I'm-
recommendation
Okay, I just
from,
wanna make sure.
we'll have to do a public hearing on whatever we're gonna go forward with. And then once that public hearing is done, they'll make a recommendation on that public hearing, and then it'll come to you for another public hearing. But
I just wanna make sure we all understand we're gonna be.
We're gonna be
meeting
That's what I
again.
want to do, that's my goal, that can come and have
I
a
think-
meeting and, yeah.
I think you guys probably need to digest what you heard tonight and, you know, work out where you want that to go in the ordinance, come up with something, you know, a little more definite.
Can both of those things be in one meeting, like the proposal to them, also the thing that we have to do for the regional planning?
We could, but they want it done sooner than later,
Okay.
and the thing for regional planning doesn't require a public hearing, so it doesn't require publication in the paper, I don't have to wait all that time. We could set it, you know, we just need 24 hours notice, so we could set it fairly soon, whereas the public hearing, you have a time limit, we have to get it published, and that will push that back a ways. So, sometime, you know, later this week or sometime during next week, you guys have it'll be a short meeting.
Okay. Any other business?
Is there any suggestions on date or time?
You got my dates.
Okay, I do have your dates. You're open, okay. This time of night, okay for everybody? Or you wanna do it sooner or
Yeah,
later, or?
I know I'm busy the fourth
The
of
4th.
next month, but nothing that comes to mind right now. I cannot make
Coming up
that.
into a busy section here, so.
Just like to say thank you for taking over.
We're not done yet. Any other business?
That was my other business.
Okay, I wanna make a motion to adjourn, anybody?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Got one motion, anybody second?
I will second.
Got a second, all in favor? Aye, okay, good.
Well, it was daylight when I first started this podcast, and the sun was making me squint. Don't have to worry about that now. A lot said tonight. I've got it all for you. I had it all for you. Obviously, if you're at this point, you've seen it all. How's the Henry County government working? Henry County, Iowa? Let me know in the comments. And remember, if you like what you saw, give this episode a like. Make sure to follow and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Thanks to all the people that are working on this this topic. It's not an easy topic. And also thank you to my sponsors: Griner Auto Body, Car Doctor, McDonald Boneyard, Hinshaw Trailer Sales, Girling Repair, B&B Propane, and the family of Jet Stops. I'm your host, John Bain. Stay friendly, Southeast Iowa.